President Yoweri Museveni, Uganda. The long road from 1986 to 2026. For nearly 4 decades, Yoweri Museveni has been the face of Uganda's presidency. A man who came to power as a guerrilla commander and stayed on as a statesman, reformer, a politician, and lightning rod of controversies. This is the story of President Yoweri Museveni's journey. From student activism to longtime leader, his achievements, criticisms, and what he's promising for 2026. He's the 9th president of Uganda since independence in 1962 to date. Let's delve into it. Who is Museveni? Yoweri Museveni, born in 1944 in Ntungamo in southwestern Uganda, Yoweri Museveni studied economics and political science at the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where he was part of a generation of African student radicals influenced by thinkers like Walter Rodney and Frantz Fanon. That period shaped his ideas about revolutionary struggle and governance, the rise, guerrilla war, and coming to power. In the 1970s and early 1980s, after spells of armed struggle and exile, Museveni formed the National Resistance Movement, NRM, and led a 5-year guerrilla campaign that culminated in his taking power in January 1986, after the decisive Battle of Kampala. Museveni was sworn as the president. He presented himself as the leader who would restore stability after years of coups and chaos in Uganda. From revolutionary to presidency, elections and tenure, Museveni's formal presidency began in 1986. He later moved from a no-party movement system to multi-party politics, then stood in nationwide elections. He was first elected president in 1996 after a decade in power, and subsequently re-elected in 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016, and 2021, and he is running again in 2026, making this his 7th run in a national presidential contest since 1996. His long tenure has been shaped both by policy continuity and constitutional changes or amendments that led to the scrapping of presidential term limits in 2005 and age limits in 2017, respectively, from the Constitution, making it possible for him to run unlimited terms in office, even as octogenarian. Achievements and policy highlights. Supporters point to tangible economic and social progress under Museveni. Official figures and government summaries credit sustained growth. Decades of higher average of GDP growth relative to earlier periods, expanding revenues, and investments in roads, electrification, health, and primary education, including the introduction of free universal primary education in the late 1990s. His administration also emphasizes infrastructure projects and moves to exploit oil discoveries. Museveni's government often cites long stretches of relative stability and improvements in government revenue collection as foundations for development. Controversies, criticisms, and governance. But President Museveni's rule has never been without controversy. Critics, opposition leaders, and many international observers point to a shrinking civic space. Arrests of opponents, restrictions on media and public assembly, and the removal of presidential term and age limits of the president, moves that opponents say entrenched his hold on power. His presidency has been characterized by relative economic success, and, in its later period, an upsurge in homosexual activities, which led to enactment of the Anti-Homosexuality Act, 2023, which was signed into law in May 2023. This current law is considered one of the world's harshest, imposing severe penalties, including the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality and life imprisonment for consensual same-sex relations. It also criminalizes the promotion of homosexuality in the country. Some scholars describe Uganda's system under Museveni at times as competitive authoritarianism or illiberal democracy, which means elections do happen, but the playing field is often accused of being uneven. Accusations of electoral irregularities have accompanied several votes, and prominent critics, including former allies turned opponents, have faced legal pressure and, at times, imprisonment. Also, issues of human rights concerns are raised. The 2026 race, what Museveni says he will do. In 2025, Museveni and the ruling National Resistance Movement, NRM party, formally positioned him as their 2026 presidential candidate. The party launched a manifesto for 2026 to 2031 under the rallying theme of protecting the gains, pledging to consolidate infrastructure, expand social services, and push for a higher middle-income future. Museveni has publicly set ambitious economic targets, including proposals to rapidly expand Uganda's GDP. Targets critics call unrealistic, but supporters call bold. The manifesto stresses protecting past gains, accelerating industrialization, exploiting energy resources responsibly, and driving Uganda towards a higher middle-income status over the next 5 years. Main challengers and the political climate. The 2026 race is widely expected to pit Museveni against youthful opposition figures who galvanized support in 2021, most prominently Robert Bobi Wine, Kyagulanyi, and other opposition coalitions. Bobi Wine and his National Unity Platform, NUP, have repeatedly framed their campaigns around change, accountability, and opportunities for Uganda's young majority. The contest is therefore being watched closely at home and abroad, not just as a presidential race, but as a referendum on Uganda's political future, balancing legacy, development versus democratic concerns. So how should history remember Museveni? For many Ugandans, his rule brought order after chaos, investments in infrastructure, roads and services, and steady economic growth in certain periods. For others, decades in power and the erosion of democratic checks have left wounds, mistrust toward institutions, limits on political pluralism, and unresolved human rights concerns. Both narratives coexist, often uneasily. However, as of 2025, after 39 years of his authoritarian rule, Uganda has been ranked 163rd in GDP, nominal, per capita, and 157th by Human Development Index globally. Well, Ugandans are the judge in the coming election. What to watch for in Uganda's 2026 presidential general election? Heading into the 2026 presidential general election, there are 3 things to watch: the fairness of the electoral process, how the government and opposition manage campaign freedoms, and whether proposed economic promises are matched by transparent policies and financing. Uganda's future will be shaped not just by a single vote, but by how institutions, citizens, and leaders respond to that vote, and whether the next chapter is one of a reform, a continuity, or something quite different. But the question to Ugandan people is, has Museveni not outlived his usefulness? If you found this video helpful, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What do you think will be the defining issue for Uganda in 2026 election? Economic transformation, democracy, or something else? Thanks for watching. Bye.